Jesus H. Christ, I muttered, fumbling for my iPhone on the nightstand. 6 a.m. Who the hell calls at this hour? The caller ID read, Sarah, my daughter. Never a good sign. I answered, my voice thick with sleep. Sarah, what's wrong? Her voice was a choked sob. Dad, Richard, he's been kidnapped. Kidnapped? The word hung in the air like cheap cologne. My gut clenched. Richard was Sarah's husband. Well, let's just say he was a go-getter with a penchant for complicated business ventures. He always had some new scheme brewing, usually involving cryptocurrency or some other tech bro fantasy. He had taken a business trip to Rio de Janeiro a few days ago. Kidnapped? What are you talking about? Who kidnapped him? I asked, trying to sound calmer than I felt. My mind was already calculating, subtracting, figuring out how much liquid cash I actually had, which wasn't much. Being house-rich, cash-poor in the Bay Area was a real bitch, especially after the damn layoff at Oracle. They called, she wailed. Someone called. They want $70,000. Dad, I don't have that kind of money. $70,000? My Social Security check barely covered the property taxes. $70,000? Sarah, that's insane. Have you called the police? No, I can't call the police, she said, her voice rising in panic. You don't understand, Dad. Richard, he was involved in some things. Shady things. If the police get involved... She trailed off, leaving the implication hanging heavy in the air. Shady things. Great, just what I needed. My son-in-law, possibly mixed up with some Brazilian cartel. I rubbed my temples, feeling a familiar arthritis ache flare up. Back in my day, you worried about your kids getting into drugs. Now it's international kidnapping and blockchain bullshit. Sarah, what kind of shady things? I asked, bracing myself. I can't go into it now, she said, her voice tight. Just, please, Dad, I need your help. Please don't tell anyone, especially not the police. Don't tell the police? I repeated, incredulous. Sarah, this is kidnapping. This is a federal offense, probably an international one. What do you expect me to do, just wire 70 grand to some criminals in Rio? I don't know, she cried. I'm scared, Dad. Please, just think. Think about what we can do. I ran a hand through my thinning, silver blonde hair. Think. Right. Easier said than done when your daughter's on the verge of a nervous breakdown and your bank account looks like a desert landscape. All right, I said, trying to soothe her. Calm down. Let's just think. What do they say? Did they give you any instructions? How are you supposed to get them the money? They said they would call back, she said, her voice trembling. They said they were watching me. Watching her. Wonderful. My comfortable, predictable life in San Jose was suddenly turning into a bad episode of Miami Vice. I glanced out the window. The sky was just beginning to lighten, painting the Silicon Valley hills a pale pink. And there was Jerry, my neighbor, already out mowing his damn lawn. At 6 in the morning! The guy's retired, for Christ's sake. What was the rush? Usually keeps it for the weekends, but today he was making sure to rev that engine loud as hell. I gritted my teeth. Okay, Sarah, I need you to breathe. Just breathe. I'm going to think about this. I'll call you back in an hour. Don't do anything stupid. And for God's sakes, don't answer the phone if you don't recognize the number. Okay, Dad, she whispered. Thank you. I hung up the phone and tossed it back on the nightstand. $70,000. Where the hell was I going to get $70,000? I hadn't seen that kind of money since I sold my stock options when Oracle went public. A distant memory. These days, I was mostly living off a fixed income and the occasional consulting gig. The sound of Jerry's lawnmower grated on my nerves. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the noise and the rising panic in my chest. This whole situation felt wrong. Richard's shady dealings, Sarah's insistence on not involving the police. Something wasn't adding up. Can I even trust my own daughter? I sat up in bed, the springs groaning beneath me. My back ached. I needed a strong cup of coffee and a stiff shot of something stronger. Maybe 2. This was going to be a long day, and a very expensive one if I couldn't figure out a way out of it. Can I trust my daughter, and where am I going to find the money?
Jesus, what a mess, I muttered, shuffling into the kitchen. The smell of burnt coffee from yesterday's pot was enough to make me gag. I dumped the sludge, rinsed the pot, and started a fresh brew, adding an extra scoop for good measure. I needed the jolt. The rusty gear was practically empty when I got there. It was a Tuesday morning, after all. The air hung thick with the scent of stale beer and floor cleaner. Not exactly appetizing, but familiar. Gary was already at our usual booth, nursing a pint of something dark and foamy. Gary, my ex-colleague from Sun Microsystems. We both got laid off in '09. Good riddance, I say. The only good thing about that company was the people. Rough night, Bob? Gary asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. He was always a cheerful bastard, even when things were going to hell. You have no idea, I said, sliding into the booth. Sarah called. Richard's in trouble. Big trouble. Gary raised an eyebrow. Richard? That young buck? What's he done now? I ran through the story from Sarah's frantic call to the ransom demand. I left out the part about Richard's shady dealings. For now, no need to prejudice Gary. Gary listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each passing detail. When I finished, he took a long swig of his beer and set the glass down with a heavy thud. 70 grand? In Rio? This smells like a rat the size of a damn Buick, Bob. I tell about it, I sighed. Sarah's dead set against calling the cops. Says it'll make things worse. Worse how? Gary scoffed. He's already been kidnapped. What's worse than that, Bob? Getting killed? That's what I'm trying to figure out, I snapped, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, Gary, I'm just on edge. I get it, he said, his voice softening. But listen to me, Bob. You can't go Rambo on this. Vigilante justice never works. You'll end up in a Brazilian jail cell right next to your son-in-law. Call the damn cops. It's not that simple, Gary, I said, rubbing my temples. Richard, he's been involved in some, let's just say, ventures that might not be entirely on the up and up. If the police get involved, they might start digging into his business, and who knows what they'll find, and who knows what that could do to Sarah. Gary frowned. What kind of ventures? I hesitated. I don't know the specifics. Sarah's been vague, but I've heard whispers. Something about importing rare earth elements, or maybe it was crypto mining equipment. All that newfangled stuff. Whistle. Sounds like he's been playing with fire, Bob. Still, you can't let him get killed. Call the cops. Maybe, I said, hedging, but I need more information first. I need to know exactly what Richard's gotten himself into and who he's tangled with. So what are you going to do, fly down to Rio and play detective? Gary asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. No, I said, a plan forming in my mind. I'm going to hire a private investigator, someone who knows the lay of the land in Rio, someone who can find out what's really going on before I go run into the authorities. A private investigator? That's going to cost you a fortune, Bob, Gary pointed out. I know, I said grimly, but it might be cheaper than $70,000. Besides, maybe this way I can find some leverage, something to bargain with. I pulled out my iPhone and started searching for private investigators in Rio de Janeiro. The first few websites looked like scams, filled with stock photos and cheesy testimonials. Finally, I found one that seemed legitimate. Investigação Confidencial. The website was in Portuguese, but it had an English translation. They specialized in missing persons and extortion cases. Perfect. I clicked on the Contact Us button and sent an email explaining my situation and asking for a consultation. Within an hour, I received a reply. A woman named Isabella Silva offered to speak with me over Zoom. We scheduled a call for later that afternoon. When the time came, I logged on, my heart pounding in my chest. Isabella was a sharp-looking woman in her late 30s with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and piercing brown eyes. After I explained my situation, she listened intently, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice calm and professional, "this is a serious situation. Kidnapping is a common problem in Rio, and these criminals are often very dangerous. I can investigate this matter for you, but it will not be cheap. My retainer fee is $5,000. $5,000? My stomach dropped. That was more than my monthly Social Security check. I hadn't touched my checkbook in years, but I might have to get it out. $5,000, I repeated, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. That's a lot of money. It is a complex case, Mr. Hayes, she said, and time is of the essence. I'll need to hire informants, conduct surveillance, and possibly negotiate with the kidnappers themselves. $5,000 is the minimum to get started. I hesitated. $5,000 was a huge risk. What if she took the money and ran? What if she found nothing? But what choice did I have? I needed to know what was going on. I needed to protect Sarah. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Okay, I'll pay the retainer fee. But I need to know what I'm getting for my money. I need regular updates, and I need to see results." She smiled. "You have my word, Mr. Hayes. I will do everything in my power to help you find your son-in-law. Now about that retainer." I gave her my credit card information, my hand trembling slightly as I typed in the numbers. As soon as the transaction went through, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I had just spent $5,000 on a stranger halfway around the world. Had I just made the biggest mistake of my life? And could I even trust that Richard wasn't in cahoots with these criminals?
Jesus, I muttered to myself as I walked into the Wells Fargo on Saratoga Avenue. It smelled like stale coffee and desperation, a real toxic blend. My arthritis was acting up, probably from the stress, and each step was a little jolt of pain. Respect your elders, my ass. Nobody gave a damn anymore. I took a number and sat down, flipping through one of those free newspapers filled with ads for reverse mortgages and Medicare Advantage plans. Snake oil salesmen, a lot of them. $5,000. Down the drain? I had to do something. I was kidding myself if I thought Sarah would cough up the money. She was a teacher, for Christ's sakes. "Mr. Hayes?" A young buck in a sharp suit was standing there, all teeth and gelled hair. "Kevin, I'm your personal banker today." Personal banker? Back in my day, we just had tellers, and they knew your name without needing a fancy title. He led me to his little cubicle, all glass and chrome like a dentist's office. "So, Mr. Hayes, what can I do for you today?" I explained the situation, leaving out the kidnapping part, of course. Just said I needed to access some funds quickly. I figured the less this kid knew, the better. Kevin listened patiently, nodding occasionally. Then he smiled, a little too wide, a little too slick. "Well, Mr. Hayes, it sounds like you're in a bit of a bind, but you're in luck. We have a fantastic product that might be just what you need." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "A home equity line of credit, a HELOC." I knew where this was going. I'd seen the commercials, heard the pitches. "I don't know, Kevin, I'm not really comfortable taking on more debt. I'm on a fixed income, you know." "But Mr. Hayes, think of the possibilities. You own your home outright, right? That's a lot of equity just sitting there doing nothing. With a HELOC, you can tap into that equity and use it for whatever you need. And then pay it back with interest while my house value does what exactly in this market? Seems like a gamble." He waved his hand dismissively. "The market always bounces back, and we're offering a very competitive introductory rate right now. You could access the funds you need immediately, and then
pay it back gradually, over time. It's a much more flexible solution than, say, selling assets or taking out a personal loan. He pulled up some numbers on his computer screen, all swirling charts and graphs that meant nothing to me. Look, Mr. Hayes, based on the value of your home, you could qualify for a line of credit of up to, well, quite a significant amount. He paused for effect, like he was about to reveal the winning lottery numbers. My stomach churned. I hated this. I hated feeling pressured, hated feeling like I was being taken advantage of. "And what's the catch, Kevin?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He chuckled nervously. "No catch, Mr. Hayes. It's a straightforward product. Of course, there are fees involved, and the interest rate will adjust after the introductory period, but we'll go over all of that in detail." He was moving fast now, shuffling papers, highlighting figures. He had me right where he wanted me, desperate. "Think about it, Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "With a HELOC, you'll have access to funds whenever you need them. It's like having a safety net, a financial cushion. A safety net that could turn into a noose if I wasn't careful." I remember my dad always saying, "If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is." But what choice did I have? Sarah was dependent on me, Richard was somewhere in Rio, and $5,000 was just the beginning if Isabella was to be believed. "All right, Kevin," I sighed, the word heavy on my tongue. "Show me the paperwork." He beamed, his teeth blinding. "Excellent decision, Mr. Hayes. I knew you'd see the value in this." He started printing out forms, a stack of legalese that would take me weeks to decipher. I skimmed through them, signing where he pointed, my hand shaking a little. As I signed the last form, a sudden wave of nausea hit me. Had I just mortgaged my future for a fool's errand? Was I throwing good money after bad and possibly even putting my house in danger? Kevin shook my hand, his grip firm and confident. "Congratulations, Mr. Hayes. You're now the proud owner of a home equity line of credit. We'll have the funds available to you within 24 hours. I walked out of the bank, the California sun suddenly feeling cold on my skin. I stared at my old Ford pickup truck, the paint peeling a little just like me. I felt like I had just made a deal with the devil. Was I making a deal with the devil?
Jesus Christ, I muttered under my breath as I pulled up to Sarah's place. It wasn't a house. It was a goddamn mansion. A monument to what exactly? Success? Or something else entirely? The driveway alone was bigger than my entire property back in Newark. A black Porsche Cayenne and a gleaming white Tesla Model X were parked side by side, looking like they belonged in a goddamn car commercial. I parked my beat-up Ford pickup a respectful distance away, feeling like a goddamn hillbilly pulling up to a debutante ball. The smell of freshly cut grass and some kind of expensive fertilizer hung in the air. A gardener, looking younger than my social security number, was meticulously trimming the hedges with electric shears. I gave him a nod, but he barely glanced my way. Probably thought I was the damn pool cleaner. I walked up to the front door, which was bigger than my first apartment, and pressed the doorbell. A camera blinked at me from above, probably recorded my every wrinkle for posterity. The door swung open, and Sarah stood there, looking every bit the Silicon Valley princess. Designer dress, perfect hair, and a smile that didn't quite reach your eyes. "Dad, you made it," she chirped, giving me a hug that felt a little too tight, a little too rehearsed. Come in. I was just about to make some herbal tea." Herbal tea. Back in my day, we drank coffee, black. The inside of the house was even more ostentatious than the outside. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, and enough abstract art to give you a goddamn migraine. It smelled like money and potpourri. The air conditioning was cranked up so high I could practically see my breath. I'm sure the thermostat alone was worth more than my monthly pension check. "Nice place, Sarah," I said, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice.
Must be nice living the high life. Oh, Dad, she said, waving her hand dismissively. It's just a house. Richard works so hard, you know? He deserves it. Hard work, huh? I said, raising an eyebrow. What exactly does Richard do, anyway? I've never really understood it. Something with cryptocurrency or blockchain? It all sounds like fancy computer games to me. She led me into a sprawling kitchen with stainless steel appliances that looked like they'd never been used. He's in finance, Dad. It's complicated. He makes investments. Investments, I repeated, slowly. Like those investments that got him mixed up with those fellas in Rio? Her smile faltered for a split second, then snapped back into place. Dad, please, that was just a misunderstanding. He's completely legitimate. Legitimate enough to need $70,000 to stay alive? I pressed, my voice rising slightly. Legitimate enough to have Isabella begging me for money? She turned away from me, fiddling with the kettle. Isabella exaggerates. She always has. You know how dramatic she can be. Dramatic? I scoffed. She sounded terrified. She said they were threatening Richard, said they were talking about trading bullets. That's not dramatic, Sarah. That's goddamn kidnapping. She turned back to me, her eyes wide and innocent. Dad, I swear I don't know anything about that. Richard doesn't tell me everything. He protects me from the ugly side of his work. Protecting her, or protecting himself. I looked around the kitchen at the expensive appliances, the granite countertops, and the goddamn Sub-Zero refrigerator that probably cost more than my truck. This wasn't the lifestyle of a man who was just making investments. This was the lifestyle of someone who was taking risks. Big risks. I forced myself to calm down. Getting angry wouldn't solve anything. I needed to play this smart. Okay, Sarah, I said, trying to soften my tone. I believe you, but I'm still worried. I just want to make sure Richard is safe and that you're safe. I am, Dad, she said, giving me another one of those fake smiles. Everything's fine, really. I knew she was lying. I could smell it, like the faint metallic tang of deceit. I decided to change the subject. Say, that's a nice USB charger you got there. I pointed to a small, unassuming white cube plugged into an outlet near the kitchen island. Oh, that? She said, shrugging. Just a cheap one I picked up online. Why? No reason, I said, my mind racing. Just wondering if it's one of those fast-charging ones. My iPhone's been acting up lately. The battery drains so fast. As subtly as I could, I reached out and touched it, noting the brand. It was a generic one, likely from some Chinese manufacturer I'd never heard of. It looked innocuous enough, but I had a plan. After a few more minutes of strained conversation about the weather and her tennis lessons, back in my day we played stickball in the street, I made my excuses and left. As I walked back to my truck, I felt a burning anger in my gut. Sarah was either incredibly naive or a damn good liar. Either way, I needed to know the truth. The next day, I went back to Sarah's house while she was out doing yoga. I told her I'd left my favorite hat in her house the day before. I walked straight to the USB charger, replaced it with an identical one I had purchased online, but this one had a hidden voice recorder inside, disguised as a regular USB charger. I even made sure the blue LED indicator light worked. Now, all I had to do was wait and listen. I knew it was a long shot, but it was the only lead I had. What would the recorder uncover?
Jesus Christ, I muttered under my breath as I pulled up to Sarah's place. It wasn't a house. It was a goddamn mansion. A monument to what exactly? Success? Or something else entirely? The driveway alone was bigger than my entire property back in Newark. A black Porsche Cayenne and a gleaming white Tesla Model X were parked side by side, looking like they belonged in a goddamn car commercial. I parked my beat-up Ford pickup a respectful distance away, feeling like a goddamn hillbilly pulling up to a debutante ball.
The smell of freshly cut grass and some kind of expensive fertilizer hung in the air. A gardener, looking younger than my social security number, was meticulously trimming the hedges with electric shears. I gave him a nod, but he barely glanced my way. Probably thought I was a damn pool cleaner. I walked up to the front door, which was bigger than my first apartment, and pressed the doorbell. A camera blinked at me from above. Probably recorded my every wrinkle for posterity. The door swung open, and Sarah stood there, looking every bit the Silicon Valley princess. Designer dress, perfect hair, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Dad, you made it," she chirped, giving me a hug that felt a little too tight, a little too rehearsed. Come in, come in. I was just about to make some herbal tea." Herbal tea. Back in my day, we drank coffee, black. The inside of the house was even more ostentatious than the outside. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, and enough abstract art to give you a goddamn migraine. It smelled like money and potpourri. The air conditioning was cranked up so high I could practically see my breath. I'm sure the thermostat alone was worth more than my monthly pension check. "Nice place, Sarah," I said, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "Must be nice living the high life." "Oh, Dad," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "It's just a house. Richard works so hard, you know. He deserves it." "Hard work, huh?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "What exactly does Richard do, anyway? I've never really understood it. Something with cryptocurrency, right? Or blockchain? It all sounds like fancy computer games to me." She led me into a sprawling kitchen with stainless steel appliances that looked like they'd never been used. "He's in finance, Dad. It's complicated. He makes investments." "Investments?" I repeated slowly. "Like those investments that got him mixed up with those fellas in Rio?" Her smile faltered for a split second, then snapped back into place. "Dad, please, that was just a misunderstanding. He's completely legitimate." "Legitimate enough to need $70,000 to stay alive?" I pressed, my voice rising slightly. "Legitimate enough to have Isabella begging me for money?" She turned away from me, fiddling with the kettle. "Isabella exaggerates. She always has. You know how dramatic she can be." "Dramatic?" I scoffed. She sounded terrified. She said they were threatening Richard. Said they were talking about trading bullets. That's not dramatic. That's goddamn kidnapping. She turned back to me, her eyes wide and innocent. "Dad, I swear, I don't know anything about that. Richard doesn't tell me everything. He protects me from the ugly side of his work." Protecting her? Or protecting himself? I looked around the kitchen at the expensive appliances, the granite countertops, the goddamn Sub-Zero refrigerator that probably cost more than my truck. This wasn't the lifestyle of a man who was just making investments. This was the lifestyle of someone who was taking risks, big risks. I forced myself to calm down. Getting angry wouldn't solve anything. I needed to play this smart. "Okay, Sarah," I said, trying to soften my tone. "I believe you, but I'm still worried. I just want to make sure Richard is safe and that you're safe." "I am, Dad," she said, giving me another one of those fake smiles. "Everything's fine, really." I knew she was lying. I could smell it, like the faint metallic tang of deceit. I decided to change the subject. "Say, that's a nice USB charger you got there." I pointed to a small, unassuming white cube plugged into an outlet near the kitchen island. "Oh, that," she said, shrugging. "Just a cheap one I picked up online." "Why?" "No reason," I said, my mind racing. "Just wondering if it's one of those fast-charging ones. My iPhone's been acting up lately. The battery drains so fast." As subtly as I could, I reached out and touched it, noting the brand. It was a generic one, likely from some Chinese manufacturer I'd never heard of. It looked innocuous enough, but I had a plan. After a few more minutes of strained conversation about the weather and her tennis lessons. Tennis lessons? Back in my day, we played stickball in the street. I made my excuses and left. As I walked back to my truck,
I felt the burning anger in my gut. Sarah was either incredibly naive or a damn good liar. Either way, I needed to know the truth. The next day, I went back to Sarah's house while she was out doing yoga. I told her I had left my favorite hat in her house the day before. I walked straight to the USB charger, replaced it with an identical one I had purchased online, but this one had a hidden voice recorder inside, disguised as a regular USB charger. I even made sure the blue LED indicator light worked. Now, all I had to do was wait and listen. I knew it was a long shot, but it was the only lead I had. What would the recorder uncover?
Shit, I muttered, easing myself into my rickety old workbench chair. Arthritis was kicking up a storm in my knees. Back in my day, we didn't have ergonomic anything. We just toughed it out. Now I pay for it. My workshop. It's my sanctuary. Used to be the garage, but Sarah insisted on turning that into a Zen meditation space when they moved in. Said it was good for Richard's anxiety. Anxiety, my ass. He was just lazy. I, meanwhile, got relegated to this converted shed in the backyard. Still, it's got everything I need. Soldering iron, oscilloscope, a lifetime supply of resistors, and a half-empty bottle of bullet bourbon. I plugged the USB drive into my ancient Dell laptop, a machine I built myself, mind you, back when Dell was still a twinkle in Michael's eye. The thing runs on Windows XP. Don't even ask. The audio file loaded. Static. Then, Sarah's voice, clear as a bell. "David, are you sure about this? I still think it's insane." David, her brother, the doctor, the smug one who always looked down his nose at me and my antiquated profession. "Sarah, we've been over this. Richard is hemorrhaging money. The business is circling the drain. He's about to be exposed. This is the only way." His voice was smooth, professional, like he was discussing a patient's prognosis instead of a kidnapping. My blood ran cold. "But the insurance policy, $70,000 isn't going to solve everything, is it?" Sarah asked. I could hear the tremor in her voice now. "It's a start, enough to get us out of the immediate hole. We can figure out the rest later. Besides," David's voice dropped, becoming almost clinical, "think of it as an investment in our future." Investment? They were talking about my daughter's husband, about endangering his life for a lousy 70 grand. Then came the part that made my stomach churn. "What if he resists?" Sarah asked. "He won't. I've already taken care of that. A little something to convince him to cooperate." There was a pause. "And if things go south, well, I have access to things that can make a death certificate convincing." My hand tightened around the mouse. What the hell did that mean? "Like what?" Sarah pressed. "You're not suggesting—" "Propofol," David stated, the word hanging in the air like a death sentence. "A little goes a long way. Untraceable, clean. They'd rule it a heart attack or something. Stress-induced." Propofol. The stuff that killed Michael Jackson. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about murder. My daughter's husband was about to be murdered by my daughter's brother. But what about Mom and Bob? They'll be devastated," Sarah stammered. "They'll get over it. Everyone does. Besides," David said, his voice devoid of emotion, "think of the inheritance. It won't be much, but it will give you and Mom a leg up." The audacity. They were planning to profit from Richard's death, thinking about the crumbs they'd get from my Social Security checks. I worked my whole life so that my daughter didn't need to rely on me for her retirement. I planned on leaving it all to my grandkids.
The recording continued, but the clarity started to fade. I heard static again, a garbled mess of sounds. Then a loud crackle, like a short circuit. Plan B. Always too risky. Police involved. No loose ends. Then a burst of static so loud it made my ears ring. Then silence. Just the hum of the laptop and the buzzing in my ears. The file had corrupted. Damn it. I tried again, replaying the recording from different points, hoping to salvage something, anything. More fragments emerged, like pieces of a shattered mirror. Insurance fraud. Brazil. Local contacts. Richard knows too much. Offshore accounts. If he talks, we're all... The recording ended abruptly, leaving me with a jumbled mess of half-sentences and unanswered questions. They were talking about insurance fraud, offshore accounts, something about Richard knowing too much. They were using contacts in Brazil, and there was a plan B if things went south. Rage boiled inside me, hot and corrosive. $70,000. Propofol. Brazil. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. This was planned, calculated, evil. I leaned back in my chair, my head spinning. I needed to think, clearly, logically, like an engineer. But all I felt was a raw, primal fury. I had to save Richard. But how? And how much of this goddamn mess had Sarah been involved in? That corrupted file. Those missing pieces. Could I recover the lost data? Or was that fragmented recording all I had to go on? Could I even trust the police now?
Christ almighty, I muttered under my breath, pushing away from the computer. I needed air, real air, not the stale, recycled crap from my home office. And I needed to see Richard. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and despair. You know the smell, that sterile tang that clings to your clothes long after you've left. I found Richard in a private room, hooked up to more machines than a NASA control panel. Sarah was there, perched on the edge of a chair, looking like a wilted flower. "Bob," she said, her voice thin and reedy, "thank God you're here." I nodded curtly, ignoring her. My focus was on Richard. He was pale, too pale, and his breathing was shallow. I squeezed his hand, and he stirred slightly. Relief washed over me in a small, pathetic wave. He was alive. For now. David was nowhere to be seen. "Where's David?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Sarah sniffled. "He went to get some coffee. He's been here all night, Bob. He's devastated." "Devastated my ass." I waited, simmering, until David strolled back in, carrying 2 styrofoam cups. He had that carefully crafted look of concern on his face, the kind you see on used car salesmen and politicians. "Bob, so glad you could make it," he said, offering me a cup. "Terrible situation. Just terrible." I waved the coffee away. "We need to talk, David. Alone." Sarah looked from me to David, her eyes wide. "What's going on?" "Sarah, could you give us a minute?" I asked, trying to inject some steel into my voice. "I need to speak with David about something important." She hesitated, then reluctantly nodded and shuffled out of the room, leaving David and me alone with the rhythmic beeping of Richard's monitors. I didn't waste any time. "I know about the insurance fraud, David, and the offshore accounts. I know about Brazil. I know about Plan B." His face didn't even flicker, not at first. He just stood there, holding the 2 cups of coffee, his expression unreadable. Then a slight twitch appeared in his left eyelid, a tiny, almost imperceptible tick. I'd seen it before, back when he was trying to convince me to invest in that ridiculous crypto scheme. He only did it when he was lying through his teeth. "Bob, I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice smooth and even. "You're obviously stressed out. This whole situation is traumatic. Maybe you're not thinking clearly." "Oh, I'm thinking clearly, David," I said, taking a step closer. "I heard the recording, the one where you and Sarah were discussing how Richard knew too much, the one where you mentioned local contacts in Brazil, the one where you talked about getting rid of loose ends." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Bob, you're letting your imagination run wild. That recording must be taken out of context." Sarah and I were probably discussing business matters, completely unrelated to Richard's accident. Business matters that involve propofol and $70,000? Come on, David, I'm not stupid. I may be old, but I can still put two and two together. He set the coffees down on the bedside table, the movement a little too deliberate, a little too careful. "Bob, I think you need to calm down. You're making wild accusations. This is a hospital. People are trying to rest." "Richard is resting all right thanks to you," I said, my voice rising. "You tried to kill him, didn't you? You tried to make it look like an accident so you could cash in on his life insurance policy." "That's absurd," David exclaimed, his voice finally cracking. "I would never do anything to hurt Richard. He's like a son to me." "Bullshit. He barely tolerated Richard, always condescending, always subtly undermining him. I remember countless dinners where David would lecture Richard on his lack of ambition or his poor financial decisions. "Don't give me that crap," I snapped. "I know you, David. I know what you're capable of. You're a snake oil salesman in a fancy suit." He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "I'm calling the police." I reached for my phone, but he grabbed my wrist. "Bob, please, don't do this. Think about Sarah. Think about what this will do to her." "She's in on it, isn't she?" I said, my eyes narrowing. He didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. "Get your hands off me," I growled, shaking him off. He stepped back, his face pale. "Okay, Bob, okay. Just think about what you're doing. You're going to destroy your family." "You already did that, David," I said, grabbing my phone. While he was distracted, trying to salvage the situation with his pathetic appeals to family loyalty, I noticed his laptop sitting on a nearby table. It was open, logged in. Opportunity knocked. I pretended to fumble with my phone, then subtly moved closer to the laptop. "Look, Bob, maybe we can talk this through," David was saying, his voice pleading. "Maybe we can find a solution that works for everyone." I ignored him, my eyes scanning the screen. A folder labeled Project Nightingale. I quickly plugged a USB drive into the side of the laptop, praying that I could copy the contents without him noticing. The little green light on the drive flickered to life. "I'm not interested in your solutions, David," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm interested in justice for Richard." He was still babbling, still trying to convince me that I was overreacting, that I was misinterpreting everything. But I wasn't listening. I was focused on that little green light, willing it to work faster. Almost done. Finally, the transfer completed. I ejected the drive and slipped it into my pocket, just as David turned back towards me. "Bob, please, don't do this. I beg you." I gave him a cold, hard stare. "It's too late, David." I walked out of the room, leaving him standing there, defeated. As I walked home, my mind raced. What secrets were hidden in David's computer?
Jesus, tap-dancing Christ, I muttered to myself. What the hell had I gotten myself into? I needed some bulk toilet paper and maybe one of those rotisserie chickens to take my mind off things. Costco run. Retail therapy. Senior citizen style. The fluorescent lights at the San Jose Costco always hit me hard. It's like walking into a goddamn spaceship. I grabbed a cart, the wheels squeaking like a rusty gate, and navigated the aisles, dodging soccer moms and guys stocking up on enough mayonnaise to embalm a small army. I was comparing the price per square foot on the Kirkland Signature toilet paper, which, let's be honest, ain't what it used to be, when I heard a familiar voice. "Bob! Bob Hayes! Is that you?" I turned around and there he was, Kevin! Kevin Thompson, VP of something or other at Wells Fargo. He handled our accounts. Or rather, he used to, before I froze everything. He was wearing one of those smug, I make six figures and play golf on weekends smiles. Kevin, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Fancy seeing you here. Indeed, he said, adjusting his tie. Small world. How's everything going? Peachy, I replied, grabbing the biggest pack of toilet paper. Just living the dream. Early retirement. You know how it is. He chuckled, a sound that grated on my nerves. Retirement suits you, though I imagine it can be challenging sometimes, living on a fixed income these days. I stared at him, trying to decipher his tone. Was that a hint of something? We manage, I said, keeping it vague. I've been investing in some municipal bonds to help out. Smart move, Kevin said smoothly, though some investments are riskier than others, especially when dealing with, shall we say, less than reputable individuals. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. One has to be careful who they trust with their legacy. My gut clenched. He knew. He knew about Richard. He knew about the investigation. He was subtly threatening me right here in the bulk food aisle of Costco. I appreciate the advice, Kevin, I said, my voice hardening. I'm a big boy. I can handle my own finances. I shifted my weight, feeling the USB drive heavy in my pocket. I suddenly wondered if he knew about that too. He smiled again, that same condescending snake oil salesman smile. Of course, Bob. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of all the potential pitfalls. He gestured towards the display of those pre-cooked shrimp platters. Say, are you planning on having a party anytime soon? Those shrimp are quite popular. No parties planned, I said, my eyes locked on his. Just a quiet life. Well, Kevin said, clapping me on the shoulder a little too hard, it was good to see you, Bob. Take care. He walked away, disappearing into the crowd near the electronics section, presumably to buy a new TV he didn't need. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. This was bad. Really bad. Kevin knew. And if Kevin knew, that meant Sarah, David. They were all in on it. They were using Kevin, using the bank to put the squeeze on me. The whole damn family was trying to bleed me dry. I felt a surge of anger, hot and bitter, mixed with a cold dread. They were playing a dangerous game. I looked down at the cart, at the giant pack of toilet paper, the rotisserie chicken, the industrial-sized jar of mayonnaise. It all seemed so absurd, so normal. While my world was crumbling around me, people were just buying groceries. I needed to get out of here. Think. Plan. I grabbed a pack of batteries, something I actually needed, paid at the self-checkout, damn those things, back in my day cashiers were human, and practically ran to my car. As I drove home, the setting sun glinting off the windshield, I replayed the conversation with Kevin in my head. His words, his tone, his damn smile. It was all so calculated, so predatory. They thought they could intimidate me. They thought they could scare me into backing down, but they were wrong. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I might be an old man, retired and living on a fixed income, but I wasn't stupid, and I wasn't going to let them get away with this. But could I really win this fight? I was just one old man, armed with a USB drive and a dwindling bank account, against a network of deceit, greed, and potentially something far more dangerous. Was I in over my head?
Okay, screw it, I thought. No more dancing around the edges. It was time to lay my cards on the table, even if they were a little dog-eared. I drove straight to Sarah's place in Los Gatos. McMansion, the kind you see popping up all over the damn valley, built on the bones of some orchard that used to feed us all. 3-car garage, perfectly manicured lawn, the whole 9 yards. Probably mortgaged to the hilt, these young bucks. I pulled the old Buick up to the curb, feeling like a refugee from another century landing on Mars. The air smelled like money and fertilizer. And was that Jasmine? Sarah always did have a weakness for fancy smells. I marched up to the front door, my arthritis acting up something fierce. Rang the bell,
waited. The chime echoed through the house, a sterile, digital melody that grated on my nerves. Back in my day, doorbells had character. A little rusty spring, a satisfying ding-dong. This was just noise. David answered. His face was pale, drawn. He was wearing one of those stupid polo shirts with the popped collar. Looked like he hadn't slept in days. Good. "Bob," he said, his voice tight. "David," I replied, my voice flat. "I think we need to talk." He hesitated for a split second, then stepped aside. "Come in." The house was immaculate, too immaculate, like nobody actually lived there, all beige and chrome and glass. Sarah was in the living room, sitting on a ridiculously oversized white couch, looking like she'd been crying. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup smeared. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling. I held up my hand. "Save it, Sarah. I know everything." I pulled out the USB drive from my pocket. I have a recording, an uncorrupted recording of your conversation with Kevin, discussing arrangements. I paused, letting the word hang in the air like a bad smell. Discussing how you were going to use him to shake me down for $70,000. Sarah's face crumpled. David just stared at the floor. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I went through hell trying to scrub metadata from that thing, you know? All the timestamps, file names, author info. I swear, these computers make it so damned hard to get away with anything, even if you want to. I shook my head, then refocused. Anyway, doesn't matter. I've got enough. You both know it's enough. I walked closer, my voice low and dangerous. So here's the deal. You call them off. You tell those thugs in Rio that the deal is off, and you return the money. Every damn penny of that HELOC you convinced me to take out on my house. Sarah started to sob. Big, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. David put his arm around her, but he didn't look at me. "Dad," she choked out, we didn't mean for it to go this far. We were just desperate. We have bills. The business, it's not doing well." "Desperate?" I scoffed. "You risked your husband's life, my life, for a few extra dollars? You call that desperate? I call that insane." David finally looked up, his eyes pleading. "Bob, please, we'll do anything. We'll pay you back. We'll sell the house." "You'll call them off," I repeated, my voice unwavering. "Right now, and you'll transfer the money back to my account. I want to see it in my Wells Fargo account before I leave this house. Understand?" They both nodded, their faces etched with defeat. Sarah reached for her iPhone, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She made the call, speaking in hushed tones, her Portuguese a jumble of apologies and explanations. David, meanwhile, was already logged onto his laptop, initiating the transfer. He looked like a man condemned. I watched them, my heart pounding in my chest. I'd done it. I'd called their bluff, had stared into the abyss and somehow managed to pull myself back from the edge. The transfer went through. The money, minus whatever fees Wells Fargo would inevitably charge, was back in my account. Sarah hung up the phone, her face streaked with tears. "It's done," she said, her voice barely a whisper. They said they understand. They'll leave him alone." I stared at them, searching for any sign of deception. Their faces were a mask of misery and regret. It seemed genuine. "Good," I said, my voice still hard. "Now, I'm going to leave, and I never want to see either of you again, not until I'm sure Kevin is safe." I turned and walked out of the house,
the weight on my shoulders lighter than it had been in days. I'd won. I'd saved my son-in-law. I'd protected my meager retirement. But as I drove away, a nagging feeling gnawed at me. Something wasn't right. It had all been too easy, too quick. They had folded too readily. Had I really won? Or had I just walked into another trap?
Well, ain't that a kick in the teeth, I muttered, more to myself than anyone. The relief I felt driving away was a damn mirage in the desert, this feeling in my gut. It wasn't just indigestion from that greasy burger I grabbed. It was dread. I was back in my condo, staring at the damn walls, trying to figure out what I'd missed. Sarah and David giving up that easy? It didn't jibe with the desperation I saw in their eyes earlier. Then it hit me. Like a 2x4 to the skull. I spun the car around so fast I almost took out Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning roses. Didn't even bother parking right, just slammed it into park and ran back to Sarah's house. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open, calling out, "Sarah? David?" Silence. Then I saw them, sitting at the kitchen table, holding hands, and smiling. Not happy exactly, more like resigned and amused, like they were in on some joke I hadn't heard. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice cracking. Sarah sighed, the sound like air leaking from a tire. "Bob, sit down. We need to talk." I stayed standing, arms crossed, glaring at them. "Talk? You two just tried to shake me down for 70 grand. There's nothing to talk about except how you're going to explain this to the cops." David chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Oh, Bob, you recorded us, didn't you? Clever for an old guy, but predictable." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, predictable?" Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out my old checkbook, the one I hadn't used in years but kept for, well, I don't even know why anymore. She flipped it open, revealing a small silver microphone taped to the inside cover. "We knew you were recording us, Bob," she said, her voice almost gentle. "We saw you fumbling with it earlier when you were fixing the loose wire in the outlet. Richard told us you might try something like that. He knows you better than we do." Richard, her damn brother, the real snake in the grass, the one I thought I could trust. "Richard?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. David nodded. "He's been helping us, Bob, guiding us. He knew you wouldn't just hand over the money. He knew you'd try to be a hero." "But the money, the transfer back to my account," I stammered. "You acted so scared." Sarah smiled, a chillingly cold expression. "Oh, we were acting, Bob. It was all for show." "Show? For what? The pieces started to fall into place, each one hitting me like a punch to the gut. "To lull you into a false sense of security," David finished for me, "while Richard emptied your accounts." I felt like I was going to be sick. My head swam. "Emptied my accounts? What are you talking about?" Sarah pulled out her iPhone and showed me the screen. A series of transactions, each one labeled International Wire Transfer. The dates went back weeks, small amounts at first, then larger and larger sums, all going to some bank in the Cayman Islands. He started small, testing the waters. Then when he knew he could get away with it, he took everything, even the money from the HELOC. "It's all gone, Bob. Every damn penny." But how? I never authorized any of this," I protested, my voice rising in panic. David chuckled again. Richard had your online banking credentials, Bob. He's been managing your finances for years. He knows your passwords, your security questions, everything. He set up the Zelle transfers too, linking it to a burner phone. The phantom factor. It all came crashing down. I should have paid more attention. I should have questioned those small fees, those weird transactions. I just chalked it up to old age and technological incompetence. He said you were getting forgetful, Bob, Sarah continued, twisting the knife. He said you wouldn't notice, and he was right. I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly weak. Everything I had worked for, everything I had saved, gone, vanished, stolen by my own family. But why? Why? Asked my voice, barely audible. Kevin needed help, Bob. He's in deep trouble in Rio. We needed the money, desperately. And Richard saw an opportunity. Opportunity. That's all I was to them. An opportunity, a mark, a fool. I looked from Sarah to David, their faces blank, their eyes devoid of remorse. I'd been played. Masterfully. They knew I was recording them and probably would call the cops, but by then the money would be long gone to a foreign account thanks to Richard, leaving the police with no leads. So what happens now? I asked, my voice flat. Now, David said, standing up, we wait for Richard to send us our cut. And you figure out how to live on Social Security, maybe get a job at Walmart. Back in my day, men had more respect for the elders. But nowadays, you can't trust anyone, especially family. They walked out of the house, leaving me sitting there alone, surrounded by the wreckage of my life. The sound of the front door closing echoed in my ears, a final, deafening blow. Had I just lost everything?
Well, screw me sideways. That's what I muttered, shuffling back into the house. The silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator, a sound that suddenly seemed mocking. I felt hollowed out, like someone had taken a melon baller to my soul. I wandered into the living room, the same living room where Sarah and David had just calmly dismantled my life. The TV remote lay on the coffee table, a black brick of indifference. I picked it up, thumbed through the channels, landing on some home improvement show. A young couple, all bright smiles and gleaming white teeth, were tearing down a kitchen backsplash. I switched it off. Too much. Just too damn much. I needed a beer. I made my way to the fridge, the linoleum cold beneath my socked feet. Reached in for a Stone IPA, the kind I usually savored. Tonight I just cracked it open and chugged half of it straight down. The bitterness barely registered. I wandered through the house, a ghost in my own home. The pictures on the walls, family vacations, graduations, all seemed like relics from another life. A life where I hadn't been a walking ATM, a patsy for my own kin. I stopped in front of my den, my sanctuary. My workbench, covered in half-disassembled radios, oscilloscopes, and soldering irons, looked accusingly back at me. It was my happy place, where I could lose myself in the intricacies of circuits and transistors, a world where logic reigned supreme. Now, even that felt tainted. What good was all this knowledge, all this tinkering, if I couldn't even see the con coming from my own family? I sat down heavily in my worn leather chair, the springs groaning in protest. I swiveled to face my computer. For a second, I contemplated firing it up, checking my now ravaged accounts one last time, seeing the damage in stark digital black and white. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. It was like picking at a scab. Instead, I just stared at the blank screen, the cursor blinking mockingly. That's when I saw it. Taped to the front door, partially obscured by the jamb, was a bright yellow notice. My heart lurched. I knew what it was before I even got up. Eviction. I ripped it off the door, the paper tearing slightly. The words swam before my eyes. Notice of foreclosure. Failure to pay. Home equity line of credit. Richard, that snake, that weasel. He hadn't just drained my accounts, he'd leveraged my house, taken out a home equity line of credit and bled it dry. All those little charges and transfers I thought were Sarah's mistakes must have been him, pulling funds out of the HELOC and funneling them into some untraceable account. The phantom charges were just a smokescreen, one more layer of obfuscation. The blood drained from my face. This wasn't just about losing my savings. This was about losing my home, the roof over my head, everything. I sank to the floor, the eviction notice clutched in my hand. The beer slipped from my grasp and spilled across the linoleum, a dark, frothy pool spreading around me. I didn't even have the energy to cry. This was it, the end. I was going to be out on the street, a 65-year-old man, broke and homeless, in the heart of Silicon Valley. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my life building this place, contributing to the tech boom, only to be chewed up and spat out by the very system I helped create. I managed to pull myself up, using the doorframe for support. Stumbled into the kitchen again, grabbing the bottle of Jameson I kept for emergencies. Tonight definitely qualified. I poured myself a generous shot, neat, and downed it in one gulp. The whiskey burned its way down my throat, a temporary distraction from the icy dread that had settled in my gut. The eviction notice fluttered to the floor. I didn't pick it up. What was the point? I looked around the house, at the familiar furniture, the worn carpets, the faded photographs, all about to be gone, all about to be someone else's. I thought about calling someone, a lawyer, the police, but what could they do? The money was gone, the damage was done, and the wheels of justice, I knew from bitter experience, turned agonizingly slow. I just wanted to disappear, to crawl into a hole and die. In my day, you respected your elders. You took care of your family. You didn't steal their life savings and leave them out on the street. But that was them. This is now. And now, I was screwed. Royally. I took another swig of whiskey, the bottle now my only companion. The sun was setting, casting long, ominous shadows across the room. I watched as the light faded, slowly, inexorably, until the room was plunged into darkness. How the hell was I going to get out of this mess?
God damn it, I muttered, pushing myself off the kitchen counter. The whiskey hadn't helped, just amplified the despair. I figured I ought to start packing, even if it felt like arranging deck chairs on the Titanic. I mean, what was I going to take? The memories? They were the only things of real value left, and those bastards couldn't repossess them. I shuffled towards the hallway, past the framed photos of my daughter Sarah and her family. Pictures from happier times. Sarah beaming on her wedding day, little Timmy grinning toothlessly in his baseball uniform. Then there were more recent photos of my son-in-law David teaching Timmy about something on the computer. Those pictures made me want to punch a wall. He always looked so damn pleased with himself. A snake oil salesman, that's what he was. I pushed open the door to my workshop. It was a disaster area, a testament to years of half-finished projects and discarded electronics. Ham radio equipment I hadn't touched in years lined one wall, gathering dust. A half-disassembled toaster oven sat on the workbench, its innards splayed out like a dissected frog. I sighed. Where to even begin? Probably just leave it all. Let the bank deal with it. Screw it. I started rummaging through a pile of old computer parts, half-heartedly tossing stuff into cardboard boxes. CRT monitors, ancient motherboards, cables that probably hadn't been used since the dial-up days. Back in my day, we thought 56K was fast. Now, my grandson probably wouldn't even know what that meant. As I dug deeper, my hand brushed against something cold and metallic. I pulled it out, an old external hard drive. One of those bulky, clunky things from the early 2000s. I hadn't seen this thing in ages, probably filled with tax returns from the Bush administration and MP3s I'd downloaded from Napster. I almost tossed it into the box with the rest of the junk, but something stopped me. A faint memory flickered in my mind. Something about a project I'd started back in 2010. Something about Bitcoin. I'd read about it in Wired magazine, thought it sounded like a fun experiment. I'd even downloaded some software, messed around with mining a few coins, just for kicks, really. I remembered the constant humming of the computer fans, the endless calculations, and the cryptic lines of code scrolling across the screen. It was all so new back then. Damn, I muttered. Could it be? I blew the dust off the hard drive and squinted at the label. Nothing but a handwritten date. 2010 projects. But the memory nagged at me. I grabbed an old IDE to USB connector, thank God I never throw anything away, and headed back to the kitchen, hard drive in hand. I plugged the drive into my ancient Dell laptop, the one I used for paying bills online. It whirred to life, the screen flickering with the familiar Windows XP logo. The hard drive spun up, and after a few anxious moments, a list of folders appeared. I navigated through the directories, my heart pounding in my chest, projects, crypto, Bitcoin. There it was, a folder labeled Wallet. Inside, a single file, wallet.dat. Could this be it? Could this be the thing that saves me? I knew enough about Bitcoin to know that this file contained the keys to my digital fortune if there was one. I double-clicked the file, hoping against hope that I hadn't lost the password or corrupted the data. A Bitcoin wallet application opened, prompting me for a password. I typed in the one I used for everything back then, password 123, and held my breath. The wallet loaded, and then I saw it. A string of alphanumeric characters representing my Bitcoin address. And next to it, a number. 312. 312 Bitcoins. My hands started to shake. I knew that Bitcoin had gone up in value since 2010, but I had no idea how much. I quickly opened a new browser window and typed Bitcoin price into Google. The current price flashed on the screen. $69,000. I did the math in my head. 312 times 69,000, that was over $21 million. $21 million! I stared at the screen in disbelief. My mouth hung open. I felt a surge of adrenaline course through my veins, washing away the whiskey-soaked despair. This couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake, a glitch in the matrix. But the numbers didn't lie. I had stumbled upon a fortune I had completely forgotten about, a fortune that could save my house, my life, and maybe even my family. I slammed the laptop shut, the sudden movement echoing in the silent house. My mind raced, calculating the possibilities. I could pay off the mortgage, I could help Sarah and Timmy, and I could even get a little revenge on David. But could I trust him? Could I risk letting him know about this hidden wealth, especially after what he had done? I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. This was a game changer, a complete reversal of fortune. I still had a lot of questions. How would I access the Bitcoin? How would I protect it from hackers? And most importantly, how would I use it to get my family out of this mess and maybe even get a little payback along the way? Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't screwed after all. But with that money, could I really trust anyone? Well, screw it all, I muttered, snapping the laptop shut. $21 million. It felt like Monopoly money, unreal and untouchable. But if it was real, I needed someone who knew the dark corners of the internet, the places where money moved without leaving a trace. I knew just the guy. St. James Park wasn't exactly a tech hub, more like a homeless encampment with a few stray dogs and the lingering smell of stale urine. But tucked away near the Rose Garden was the Prophet, a guy who claimed to have hacked into the Pentagon back in the day. Probably bullshit, but he did seem to know his way around a Linux terminal. I found him under his usual oak tree, surrounded by a collection of shopping carts overflowing with stuff. Old newspapers, plastic bottles, tangled wires, the kind of detritus that made you wonder how he even breathed. He was muttering to himself, something about algorithms of doom and the digital apocalypse. "Hey, Prophet," I said, trying not to inhale too deeply. "Got a minute?" He looked up, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused. He squinted, trying to place me. "Hayes, Bob Hayes, the one with the, troubled offspring?" How the hell did he know that? San Jose was still a small town. "That's me," I said, forcing a smile. "I need your help with something delicate." "Delicate?" He cackled, a dry, rasping sound. "Everything's delicate when you're playing with fire, old man. What's your poison? Hiding assets from the IRS? Blackmailing your boss?" "Nothing like that," I said, pulling out my wallet. "I need you to track some offshore accounts. Find someone who's hiding in Rio de Janeiro." The mention of money seemed to sharpen his focus. "Rio, huh? That'll cost you. Blood money washes up on those beaches every day." I explained the situation, carefully omitting the part about the Bitcoin. I told him about Richard, the ransom demand, and the vague promise of offshore accounts. I painted him as a con man, pure and simple. The Prophet listened intently, his fingers drumming a rhythm on his knee. When I finished, he leaned back against the tree, a calculating look in his eyes. "Blockchain forensics," he said, almost to himself. "Tracing the digital breadcrumbs. Possible, but not easy. Especially if they're using tumblers and mixers." "Tumblers and mixers?" I asked, feeling like I was back in my software engineering days, drowning in jargon. "What are those?" "Ways to hide the origin of Bitcoin," he explained. "Think of it like laundering money, but for the digital age. Makes it harder to follow the trail." "So you can do it?" I pressed. He shrugged. "I can try, but it won't be cheap. I'll need access to specialized databases, dark web marketplaces, and my time, of course. Time is money, especially when you're dealing with criminals." "How much are we talking?" I asked, bracing myself. I was house rich, cash poor. Every dollar counted, especially now. He named a price, a steep price. $50,000. I almost choked. 50,000? For what? A few keystrokes? "Keystrokes that could save your family," he countered, his voice hardening. "Keystrokes that could put a dangerous man behind bars. Don't underestimate the value of information, Hayes, especially in this world." I ran the numbers in my head. $50,000. That was almost half of what I owed on the house. But if I didn't find Richard, if I didn't get Timmy and Sarah out of Rio... "I don't have that kind of cash lying around," I said, trying to negotiate. "I can give you $10,000 up front, and another 10 when you find him. The rest, I'll figure something out." He shook his head. "Too risky. I need collateral. Something of value. Something you wouldn't want to lose." I thought about my options. My car? My tools? The vintage stereo system my father had left me? None of it was worth $50,000. Then it hit me. The Bitcoin. "I can give you a percentage of what I recover," I said, carefully choosing my words. "A significant percentage,
but only if you find Richard and help me get my family back." He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What kind of percentage are we talking about?" 20%, I said, holding my breath. 20% of whatever I recover from Richard's offshore accounts. But if you double-cross me, if you try to run off with the money, I'll find you. I promise you that." The prophet stared at me for a long moment, his eyes boring into mine. I could see the wheels turning in his head, calculating the potential payoff. Finally, he nodded. "Deal. But I want it in writing, and I want access to the Bitcoin wallet as soon as I have a lead. Call it a performance bonus." A chill ran down my spine. This was getting dangerous. I was trusting a homeless hacker with a fortune I barely understood. But what choice did I have? Was the only other option to sit back and let the Brazilian police handle things? I had a feeling they were too late to the party. Would I trust a shady character to help me get justice? Because I wasn't sure I trusted myself.
"Shit," I muttered to myself, wrestling with the buckle on my worn-out Samsonite. I was packing the last of my things, mostly clothes that smelled faintly of mothballs and a travel-sized bottle of ibuprofen for my damn arthritis, when I heard it. The unmistakable roar of Jerry's lawnmower. 7 a.m. on a Saturday. Like I was a menace. I peered out the window, half expecting to see him gleefully tearing up the meticulously manicured lawn of his prize-winning roses. Instead, he was puttering around my own front yard, the ancient Briggs & Stratton engine of his mower coughing and sputtering like a chain smoker. "What the hell is he doing now?" I grumbled, heading for the front door. I wasn't exactly in the mood for a neighborly chat, especially not with Jerry and his incessant drone about property values and the HOA. I needed to catch my Uber to SFO in a couple of hours. Rio wasn't exactly around the corner. I opened the door, ready to unleash a torrent of pent-up frustration, but Jerry cut me off. He killed the engine, the sudden silence almost deafening. "Bob, hey, Bob, hold on a sec," he called, wiping his brow with a greasy rag. He looked genuinely apologetic, which was unusual. "Jerry," I said, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice, "what's going on? I'm kind of in a hurry." Yeah, I see the suitcase. Listen, I wanted to say I'm sorry about the early morning mowing. I know it's a pain in the ass." "It is," I agreed, bluntly. He winced. "Yeah, well, the landscapers are coming on Monday, and I wanted to get it done before they showed up. Get a head start. Plus, my wife, Carol, she's been on my case about the lawn looking like a jungle." He chuckled weakly. "You know how it is with the wives." I nodded, though I didn't really. My own wife, bless your soul, had passed on 5 years ago, and the only honey-do list I had now was the one I wrote for myself. "Anyway," Jerry continued, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, "he's not really why I came over." He paused, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to ask, well, did Sarah mention anything about moving?" My blood ran cold. "Moving? No. Why would she be moving?" Jerry hesitated, fidgeting with the rag in his hands. "Well, I saw some activity over at her place a few nights ago. Late at night, like around 1 a.m. "Activity? What kind of activity?" I demanded, my voice rising. "A van, Bob. A big, dark-colored van. Pulled up to the house, and a couple of, fellas, I didn't recognize them, were loading boxes into it. Big boxes. Looked kind of heavy." "Boxes? What kind of boxes?" I pressed, my mind racing. Were these the same guys who had taken Sarah and Emily? Had Richard been involved? Jerry shrugged. "Couldn't see. Wrapped in brown paper, taped up tight. They weren't exactly being quiet about it either. Slamming the doors, talking loud. It woke me up, that's for sure." "Did you see Richard?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "Nope. Didn't see him. Didn't see Sarah or Emily either. Just those two guys in the van." "Did you get a license plate?" I asked, knowing it was a long shot. Jerry shook his head. "Too dark. Couldn't see a thing."
Should have called the cops, I guess, but I figured, maybe they were just moving stuff. Didn't want to be a busybody. "Damn it, Jerry," I said, the frustration boiling over. "This could be important. This could be about my family." Jerry recoiled, his face paling. "Hey, I didn't know, Bob. I'm just telling you what I saw. I thought maybe you knew something about it." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. Yelling at Jerry wasn't going to help. But this changed everything. Sarah hadn't mentioned anything about moving, about getting rid of stuff. And the timing, it was too coincidental. "Jerry," I said, my voice trembling, "did you see those guys go into the house or just out of the house?" Jerry thought for a moment, scratching his head. Now that you mention it, I only saw them carrying boxes out. I didn't see them go in." My blood ran cold.
My blood ran cold. Because only one reason existed for someone to steal out of a house and not into it. Evidence. They were stealing evidence. And if they were stealing evidence, who the hell were they working for? I thanked Jerry, gave him a 6-pack of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale from my stash as a peace offering, and practically peeled out of his driveway. I had to get to Rio. The flight was a blur. I burned through frequent flyer miles I'd been hoarding since my IBM days and upgraded myself to first class. Figured I deserved a little comfort while my life was crumbling around me. Tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face. I saw Sarah's, too, twisted in that desperate look she'd been wearing lately. I landed in Rio, the city I never wanted to see again, feeling like I'd aged 10 years in the last 10 hours. The humidity hit me like a wall the second I stepped off the plane. Christ, I hate this place. I took an Uber straight to Richard's condo. This time I didn't bother calling ahead. I pounded on the door. No answer. I pounded again, harder this time. Finally, Richard opened it, looking disheveled and surprised. He was wearing the same damn linen shirt he'd had on the last time I saw him, only this time it looked like he'd slept in it. "Bob, what are you doing here?" he asked, trying to sound nonchalant, but I could see the flicker of panic in his eyes. "Where is she, Richard?" I demanded, pushing past him into the condo. It was even messier than before. Clothes were strewn everywhere, empty beer bottles littered the coffee table, and the air smelled stale like unwashed laundry and desperation. "Where's who?" he stammered, backing away from me. "Don't play dumb with me, Richard. Where's Sarah and Emily?" They went out," he said, avoiding my gaze. "Where? Don't give me that bullshit. I know what's going on, Richard. I know about the van." His eyes widened. "What van?" "The van that was seen hauling boxes out of my daughter's house. Boxes filled with—" "What, Richard? Evidence of your little scheme?" He didn't say anything. He just stood there, his mouth agape like a fish out of water. "I talked to the Prophet," I said, watching his reaction. The Prophet, my ass. It was some online PI service Sarah had dismissed as paranoid nonsense. Turns out paranoid nonsense was exactly what I needed. I'd given Jerry's description of the van, and they'd come back with a partial plate and a list of addresses associated with the vehicle. Cost me a few $100, but it was worth every penny. Richard's face crumpled. You know? "I know enough, Richard. Now tell me the truth. What the hell have you gotten my daughter involved in?" He finally cracked. He started babbling, a jumbled mess of excuses and half-truths. Something about tax evasion, offshore accounts, and a real estate deal gone sour. The whole thing sounded like some dime store thriller. "And Sarah?" I interrupted. "She didn't know anything, I swear. I kept her out of it." "Bullshit, Richard. She was signing papers, wasn't she? She was using that HELOC money." He looked down at his feet, ashamed. She thought it was for a business investment." I felt a surge of anger so intense it made my hands shake. You used my daughter, Richard. You used my granddaughter. You risked everything for your own damn greed. I pulled out my phone, dialed a number, and put it on speaker. "Hello?" a voice answered on the other end. "This is Detective Silva. I have some information for you regarding Richard Oliveira and a series of financial crimes." Richard's face went white. He lunged for the phone, but I sidestepped him, keeping it out of his reach. "Including tax evasion, insurance fraud, and the fraudulent use of a home equity line of credit. I also have reason to believe that evidence related to these crimes was removed from a property in San Jose, California, on or about," I glanced at my phone, "June 12th. The detective on the other end was silent for a moment. Then he said, "We'll be right there, Mr. Hayes." I hung up the phone and looked at Richard, who was now slumped on the couch, his face buried in his hands. "It's over, Richard," I said, my voice cold. "It's all over." The sirens started wailing a few minutes later. Turns out Jerry, my nosy neighbor, hadn't just seen the van, he'd recorded the whole thing on his security camera. He'd sent the footage, along with some copies of documents he'd found in Sarah's trash — turns out she wasn't very good at shredding sensitive information — anonymously to the IRS and Interpol. He said he'd seen Richard acting shifty for months. Back in my day, you minded your own business. Now, everyone's a goddamn whistleblower. Richard was arrested. All his assets were seized, including the ill-gotten gains from that HELOC scam. The bank, after a little pressure from my lawyer and a few well-placed phone calls to some people I knew from IBM days, agreed to return the money to me. House rich, cash poor, no more. I spent the next few days dealing with the fallout. Lawyers, investigators, social workers, a goddamn circus. Sarah, predictably, was devastated. She claimed she had no idea what Richard was up to, that she was just trying to provide for Emily. I don't know if I believe her, but I wanted to. I needed to. The whole thing left a bitter taste in my mouth. I'd gotten my money back, but at what cost? My daughter's life was in shambles, my granddaughter was caught in the middle, and I was left feeling like a damn fool for trusting anyone. I did learn one thing, though. Sometimes the most dangerous enemies aren't the ones you see coming. They're the ones who are closest to you. The ones you think you know. Well, I'll be damned. Back in San Jose, the air smelled cleaner, even if it was just the recycled water they were spraying on the medians. My house, thankfully, didn't smell of mildew and desperation anymore. Just the faint scent of lemon pledge, courtesy of Mrs. Rodriguez, my cleaning lady. She's a saint, that woman. Sarah and Richard, they were facing a mess of charges. Fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, the list went on. David, that poor sap, was caught up in it too, apparently used as some kind of unwitting mule. He was cooperating with the authorities, hoping to get a lighter sentence. Sarah was a mess. Emily was staying with me for the time being. She was surprisingly resilient. Kids are. But the haunted look in her eyes, that'll stick with me. The money from the HELOC deposited back into my account. Wells Fargo, bless their bureaucratic little hearts, even threw in a small apology and a free checking account upgrade. Ironic, considering they were probably complicit in the damn scam in the first place. With the money back and a little extra from liquidating some of that Bitcoin I'd foolishly dismissed years ago, thank you, Richard, you useless crook, I decided to do something different, something useful. I'd been reading about renewable energy for years, solar panels, wind turbines, that sort of thing. Figured, hell, I've got the capital, might as well invest in something that'll outlast my arthritis. Did some research,
found a few promising startups working on next-generation solar tech, made some calls, met with some of these young bucks, all full of enthusiasm and jargon I barely understood. But they seemed like they had their heads screwed on right. So I invested. Not everything, mind you, I'm not a complete idiot, but a significant chunk, diversified, as they say. Some in solar, some in wind, even a little in that geothermal stuff. It felt good, doing something positive, paying it forward, as the kids say. Then, the other shoe dropped. It was a Tuesday. I was sitting in my backyard enjoying a cold anchor steam, trying to decipher the instructions for a new smart thermostat I'd bought. Emily was inside, glued to her iPad. Sarah was at some therapy appointment. A normal, almost peaceful afternoon. My phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "You think you won? Richard was just a pawn. The game is much bigger." Attached was a photo. A grainy, low-resolution image of a group of men sitting around a table. One of them looked vaguely familiar. I squinted. Then it hit me. It was Arthur Jenkins, the CFO of that software company I used to work for before they laid me off. Arthur, the guy who always wore those ridiculously expensive suits and smelled of sandalwood and corporate greed. I tried to reply to the message, but the number was disconnected. I tried reverse searching the image. Nothing. I showed it to Mrs. Rodriguez. She just shrugged and said, "Senor Bob, too many bad people in this world." She wasn't wrong. I spent the rest of the evening trying to piece it together. Richard, a small-time con man working for a larger organization. Arthur Jenkins, a high-powered executive somehow connected to it all. What was their game? What were they after? I thought about calling the police again. But what would I tell them? I got a cryptic text message and a blurry photo? They'd laugh me out of the station. This was different. This was much bigger, more complicated, more dangerous. I spent the next few days doing my own digging. I reactivated my old LinkedIn account, poked around online trying to find any connections between Richard and Arthur. I even considered hiring a private investigator, but I wasn't sure who to trust. Then I remembered something. A small, almost insignificant detail from the investigation into Richard's scam. A throwaway comment from one of the IRS agents about a series of wire transfers from a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. The agent had said something about them being difficult to trace, but ultimately inconsequential. Inconsequential? Maybe not. Maybe that was the thread I needed to pull. I knew I was walking into something potentially very dangerous, but I couldn't just let it go. I owed it to Sarah, I owed it to Emily, and damn it, I owed it to myself. I took a long sip of my beer. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across my yard. The air was getting cooler. I pulled out my iPhone and started searching for Cayman Islands Corporate Registry. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot.